Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Podcast Unflooded. I am your host, Joe Kendrick, and today we are joined by a very special guest, Lilly Hyrule. So feel free to introduce your content and the kind of stuff that you do on YouTube to those that may not know your channel.
Yes, thank you so much, Joe. Very excited to be here. As you just mentioned, you can find me as Lily Hyrule. I'm mainly creating content on YouTube at the moment, but I also have like my socials, and you know how social media is. Sometimes you really need to post on a daily basis, otherwise, no one's really gonna notice. So you can find me everywhere, but mainly I'm creating content on YouTube. And yeah, well, my name is Lily, obviously. And yeah, I'm creating content around Zelda in Nintendo as well. So if you think about it, like if you like The Legend of Zelda, what are the odds that you're going to like also Nintendo? So that's why. And that's pretty much it. Yeah.
So, how'd you get into making videos? How'd you get started?
It was gaming, video
I want the
games in
backstory.
general. Yeah, it was video games in general. I started to play my first game when I was four years old. It was my Super Mario Brothers, actually. I remember that
Ooh.
my dad bought the NES, and that's what we had at home. And that was pretty much the first game that I ever played. But it wasn't until 2015 that I kind of got excited about it because I started working for a gaming company, and that's how I managed to get into one of the E3s. And every year I was going to E3. Unfortunately, rest in peace, E3 at the moment, right? Last year it got completely shut down. But it was such a wonderful experience. And that's when I started to, I really like this. Like, I'm passionate about video games. I should have, I think it's pretty obvious for me to be creating content around video games. But video games is such a, like, it's too much. Like, you can't really cover everything, and if you do, it gets to a point where you get overwhelmed, and especially if you're not doing this full time. So it got to a point where I couldn't really keep up with it. And I've always loved The Legend of Zelda since I was like 4 5 years old. So, but it wasn't until in a specific game, which I'm going to share a little bit more about that in a bit, that I decided to start making content. And a lot of people mention, like, you're really good at Zelda, you should create content specifically for Zelda. And I was kind of avoiding that all the time, and then it struck me, just said, like, you know what, I think I really need to focus on creating content for Zelda. But I started more into gameplays and stuff like that, so I like to play Zelda games and just interact with my community. And that's how it all started. And then on I just decided to start, because of Tears of the Kingdom, I decided to start creating content on Reels. And you know that Reels and TikToks were kind of going, and I started to create small reels. And one of the reels that got a bit viral with 2.5 million views, it was about the Octorok's repair system that they introduced in Tears of the Kingdom. So that's when I kind of noticed, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna be settling into The Legend of Zelda because it has always been my passion. So that's pretty much how I got into all of this. But I've been creating content around video games since 2015, but it wasn't until last year that I started completely focusing on The Legend of Zelda, and hence why I renamed or rebranded my entire channel to Lily Hyrule instead of Lily, or whatever was the case, right? And that's it.
Hmm. I think my video's coming and going. I'm sorry about that.
No
But
worries.
I'd love to just ask some questions about that. I mean, you said that you were avoiding kind of Zelda for a while, and I'm curious because I guess like I know this feeling of like I feel like I have so much to say, but I don't want to make the video until I know exactly how to say it. Is that kind of what you were dealing with?
I'm still struggling with that till this day.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it has always been a thing because, first of all, there are so many amazing creators out there that it's just that if I create a video about something that I know for sure someone else already created a wonderful and amazing video about, it's like, why am I going to share something that everybody knows, especially from this creator who, created such an amazing video about it. And I have this kind of, struggle with the imposter syndrome all the time, where, like, why should I do this? Like, why? It's how is people going to be able to watch this if they have everything there, right? And it was very weird because there's this YouTuber that I watch as well. He focused a little bit more into productivity, and he said something that actually made me kind of switch gears as to the way that I was thinking about when I was creating content, where he says, "You're not the expert, you're not the guru, you're just the guide." And that's pretty much what made things a little bit more clear for me, because you have your own community, and even though there's an amazing and impressive video about certain topic, that doesn't necessarily mean that yours is going to be not worth it at all, especially for that community, because they're kind of expecting that. They trust you, they believe in you. So it doesn't mean that you're going to lie to them. Of course, you're going to prepare something that's going to be for them. And to our extent, we're always trying to make sure that we are not making mistakes, but everybody can make mistakes, so it's bound to happen. But yeah, I think like it has been a struggle when it comes to focusing on one particular topic, because you have this pressure of you have to be the expert, you have to know everything about it. And in reality, that's not truly what it is. It's about what you're really passionate about and how you're going to be sharing that with your community, or how you're going to be sharing that with the world. And I think that's it. Till this day, I'm still struggling, but I feel more confident, and I feel that I'm, getting out there. So yeah.
Well, I totally relate with that, and I know especially in the
Yeah.
Zelda space, especially this year. I mean, there's been so much discussion after Tears of the Kingdom came out, and it's like I don't want to even contribute to that
Yes.
discussion until I feel like I'm level-headed, because I don't want to. I mean,
Exactly.
it's just so messy. I'm curious, what you've seen of that, and your response to some of these new games, especially as someone who's been following um, the games for a while.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I've always have this kind of question, like from either people that have been followers for a very long time, or new people that just found my channel, where they ask, like, is it like the era of the wilds? Is it like, are we talking about good games, or do you prefer the linear path, or the linear kind of way, or whichever is the case, or like the 2D top gameplay that we are kind of used to, or when they're saying the Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild is not a Zelda game and stuff like that. Like, I really don't want to share a lot of like information or a lot of details on it, because I don't want to get into an ongoing argument. Because for me, I enjoy the linear ones. So I'm a big fan of the 3D Zelda games, because my first official game that got me into this was Ocarina of Time. So I played it when I was 8. That kind of uh, blew my mind completely when I started playing that game, and I've been playing every single one of the 3D titles. As soon as they moved from what we know into the new games, I know that that's here to stay. So there's no point of me demanding or telling people, go and tell, AG Onuma, go and change that, or go back to the regular. That's not going to happen. So I feel like there are a lot of things that they have improved, and I also feel like that's here to stay. I don't really think that they're going to go back to what we know. If they do, it'll be most likely like an HD version or a remake if we're lucky enough. But I think that's it. So I kind of try to stay away from telling people what I hate about the new games or what I like. I will be focusing a little bit more into what I actually liked, and not on the flaws or what I don't liked, because it's going to open, the argument and debating about whether if it's a good game or not. They are good games. Probably they're not my favorite, but they are good games. And I think that's pretty much how I can describe right now what we see on Zelda games at the moment.
Hmm. I totally agree. I mean, I love the new games. There's a lot that I love, but they're not the same as the old games, and so it's a matter of like I think they're all great,
Yeah.
and I love them all for different reasons.
Mhm.
But definitely, like, which is why it's tough to see some of this discussion online, which is like these are, not only are they nothing like Zelda, but they're the worst games ever made or whatever. Like they're not even
Yeah.
games; they're just sandboxes or whatever. And I'm like, I don't want to participate in that just because I love them all, even if I have different preferences. And I definitely feel like I grew up with Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker, and I love those classic games. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about Ocarina of Time and what inspired you to get into the series.
Um, I have to say that exploration and adventure, if we go back to the original Legend of Zelda, that's pure exploration if you think about it, right? You're just there in the overworld and just have to go and explore. That's it. Like you do have a manual, but that's a different topic. So Ocarina of Time was my first official game where I started, to get involved and embark into the journey and whatever. And when I was, crossing the first time, getting into Hyrule Field and that amazing music from Koji Kondo, and I was blown away. Like, this is it. Like, I want to know what's next. So that was the game that will pretty much have me awake every night if possible until I finished the game. For me, it was a little bit tricky though because English is not my first language. So for me in North America, it was kind of difficult for me to play a version in Spanish, which that's one of the main reasons I keep telling everybody. I've learned, or I kind of got into or learned a little bit more English and practice English while playing Ocarina of Time when I was 8. So I was like, yeah, pretty much
Oh.
video games kind of helped me through it. And for me, it was a bit of a challenge because there are a lot of things that well, not as many dialogues as in Majora's Mask, but at least in Ocarina of Time, you really have to understand what are your objectives and where you need to go and stuff. So it was a bit challenging for me when I first started. But after, I guess the more I started to play and the more I started to learn about the story and those kind of scenarios that I was not expecting things to happen, again, I was kind of blown away by the story. And that's one of the main reasons why a lot of people keep complaining about the newer games because they don't feel connected. But this has been always like this. Like when they start developing a Legend of Zelda game, they start with the gameplay. Like they want to start with the gameplay and the experience. You, the user, or you, Link. Hence why we name. I mean, we know Link's name and stuff. So when you start exploring, um, and you start, getting involved into the environment and whatever, then you have a very great story on top of it. You're completely immersed, right? And on the newer games, because of the new gameplays and mechanics, which are amazing, it feels like it's a little bit more focused on the gameplay or the mechanics rather than the story. But it has always been like that. It's just that for some reason, when we started to move or when they started to change the mechanics, that's when everything kind of scattered a little bit. But yeah, like Ocarina of Time pretty much set the bar there. Like that was the bar. Because I know that a lot of people will say, "Oh, Ocarina of Time is for everybody is a favorite." It's a very common thing, and whichever is the case. But I'm like, yeah, but I got to experience it when I was very young, and I think that is more like being biased, of course, and nostalgia. But that also set the bar for the 3D games. So if you played Wind Waker, I mean, had been going up in my list, to be honest with you. Like when I first played it, I was blown away by it. Like it's even way better. But shadow shading and all that kind of stuff, that is a cartoon Link and not really, they were kind of expecting something a little bit more mature and they never got that. That's why not a lot of people played it, but that doesn't make it a horrible game. Actually, it's a wonderful game and I'm so in love with that game. But because I've played originally, I played Ocarina of Time. It was my first game. That's why I think that's like the top of my list. Like that's number one for me. But Wind Waker is such a wonderful game that I keep telling people go and try it. It's so good. This story, the gameplay, the new mechanics. Actually, a lot of the mechanics that you see in the Wind Waker, you see them in Twilight Princess, and not a lot of people know that when they kind of merge together. And Twilight Princess, that's the reason why it's very good because of Wind Waker. So I feel like every time there's a new release or a 3D release, we get something new. I couldn't really say that much for Skyward Sword because I wasn't a fan of the motion controls, but it's probably a me thing, to be honest with you. Such a beautiful story,
I felt that
such a
too.
beautiful soundtrack. Like that, there's a reason why is the first one, but still, it's not as great as it was for me Ocarina of Time. So that's why. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I totally think that Ocarina of Time. I don't think it's a basic answer to say. I mean, I've talked to several people who like that's one of their favorite games, not just because it's not just a preference thing, but like it does so much well. And you talk about gameplay versus story, and I've seen some discussion online about this idea that the newer games have too much gameplay and not enough story. And I think Zelda at its best, like it's I totally agree that like they should be. I think like they're games. It's okay that they're developed with gameplay first in mind. But so much of what I love about Zelda is that like the story matches the gameplay and pairs with it really well. In Ocarina of Time,
Mhm.
like it's like every bit of gameplay is motivated by the story, which is motivated by gameplay, and like they're working together. And same with Wind Waker, same with Twilight Princess. To me, I feel like those games all really make a mesh together. And with Breath of the
Mhm.
Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, to me, just the memory system is like I love the story of those games, but they don't mesh with gameplay. They're just kind of a separate thing attached to gameplay. So, which is that's where my criticism comes in. It's not a I don't
Mhm.
think the story's worse. I don't think the games are worse, but I do think the if there's a pairing between gameplay and story, that it's best in games like Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm grateful because a lot of new players arrived because of Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, and they started to get into the series. And not only with the 3D ones, but also with the 2D ones, which is great because in terms of the dungeon buildings and layouts, it's like it's an amazing experience. But I also agree with a lot of things that I've read online and as to trying to justify why it was done that way. Like it makes sense. It makes sense because there are like I'm probably that kind of person that really likes to get involved in the story and follow along a quest. But you could be a completely different person saying, I just want to focus on exploring the world. And it's totally free. Like you can go anywhere, you can do whatever you want, which is kind of the beauty of the new games. And you did not have that in previous games. Like even though there were a huge like Hyrule field or a lot of dungeons or whatever, you will always limited by something. So you're limited by an item because you're not able to move forward if you don't get the hook shot or if you don't get the long shot or if you don't get the feather or whichever is the case, like the Pegasus boots, whatever. There's always an item that you have to find in order for you to keep moving. And here I really love the creativity that you have to come up with in order for you to resolve that puzzle that you have there in front of you, which I think is pretty amazing. And that's something that has always been able or achievable because of the newer games. So in a way, again, I just put it in a balance. I don't think that they're bad. They're actually amazing games. It's just that I just feel that for me, the way that I grew up, that's the formula that worked for me. And I kind of miss that. So if I don't see that, like in Tears of the Kingdom, one of my biggest criticisms and complaints, it's definitely like the treasures that you find at the shrines. Oh my god. Every time that I had a diamond, I was like, "Oh, thank God! At least it's a diamond and not a rupee or not a ruby or not a opal, because that's pretty much all you get." And I was like, I was expecting something useful, and it's not useful. Like when you get the like the rods or whatever, but they're not even good weapons for you to use in the in the kingdom, right? But yeah, I feel like that's the never ending story and argument and whether if it's a good game or not, or whether we like the old formula, is it going to ever come back, or whichever is the case. But it is what it is. I guess we accept things the way they are. And I just like to focus on enjoying the game the way it is. Honestly, I will love to keep getting more and more Zelda games, regardless of how they are right now, because I don't know how my life would be if I were, on a different year and say, oh, we're not going to develop Legend of Zelda anymore. This is our last title. I think that's going to blow my mind, but in a bad way. But let's see. Let's see.
No, I totally agree. I want them to continue. I don't mind if they change. I love that they change. One of my favorite things about the Zelda series is that it changes. And I think what's interesting, I guess, like I remember growing up with like Ocarina of
Mm.
Time, going from that to Wind Waker to Twilight Princess, and those games
Hmm.
felt so different. And then Skyward Sword came out, and it's like it felt so different. And now with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, those games all feel like, oh, those are the games that adhere to the Zelda formula. And then it changed. So I think it's like that difference is relative too as well. It's like at the time, like Wind Waker felt like such a dramatic departure. And now I
Hmm.
look at it and I'm like, yeah, it's the Ocarina of Time formula with a couple of things rearranged. That's
Yeah.
how it feels now. So I don't know. I'm excited to see what they change next, and I do want the series to continue to change. I don't want it to forget what it does well though,
Yeah.
and that's definitely why I definitely feel some nostalgia for the
Yes.
old games.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That those are there are a lot of key things or moments that they were doing great. Why take them away? Like I think that, but if you put it into that perspective for new players, I've seen people struggle playing Ocarina of Time because they fell in love with the series because of Breath of the Wild and they wanted to get into older games, right? And I see them struggling with the camera, for example, like that you have to press the Z button or the set button and then kind of moving around, and sometimes the camera doesn't help you at all, so you're kind of struggling as to how to play, how to do certain things. So in a way I kind of understand why they kind of did it this way, because it's easier for you to just turn the Nintendo Switch or whichever console you're playing in and you start playing and that's it. And then if you, let's say, if you start playing, let's for an example, Majora's Mask, but I know Majora's Mask is a little bit more tricky and a lot of people kind of step away from it. But if, let's say, you start playing it now and then you stop playing for 4 months, as soon as you boot up the game, you're not gonna have a lot of idea as to where you left off, right? And I feel like on the newer games, it's a lot easier for you to just know, oh yeah, I remember I was exploring the depths, or oh, I remember I was trying to find Korok seeds, or whichever was the case. And for me, I feel like it's a more fast experience compared to the older games in terms of the story. So you really have to be involved all the way from the beginning all the way to the end without like leaving like a very huge gap in between. So at least it makes sense. And it's not as easy as we think it is for newer players because they're kind of used to the new mechanics. And now when they try to go back, they're like, I don't understand this. Like, what I need to do, why I can't cross that if I don't have that item, right? They feel restricted or limited, which for me, that was like the kind of thing that I would love, right? When as soon as I opened that chest and I saw the bow, I'm like, oh yes, I got my favorite item, my favorite weapon. I got this. I know what to do now. Because as soon as you start going through the dungeon, you notice certain places where you might be able to use a certain weapon. And now after you get it, it makes all sense, more sense. And that way you can move around in the dungeon or the temple, whichever is the case. But yeah, I kind of feel that there's no going back, actually. So we're sticking with that formula.
That's how it is. We move forward. There's something you said earlier that I kind of want to circle back to. You were talking about
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
like the dialogue boxes of Zelda and like how they communicate like the player objective. And I realized that like I don't think it was until Breath of the Wild that there was like a start screen objective visible where you could go to your quests and say, "Oh, this is what I do next." And
Right.
all the other games, you just had to pay attention to dialogue. And I mean, you could talk to an NPC again, and you could talk to your guide, whether that's a ferry or a boat or Midna, to figure out where to go next. But it was always through dialogue. I don't think there was ever a start screen like objective menu like there are in other games.
Yeah, no, I don't think there is. I'll say that the closest to something like that was the Bomber's Notebook for Majora's Mask. But that was like the
Mm-hmm.
very early concepts or the way that they wanted to change the way that you are understanding like your missions or quests or whichever was the case. And they made a huge improvement on the 3D version, on the remaster version of Majora's Mask. But I think that was the only one, but it wasn't really like an actual log as we see right now. And not even that, like you can select it, like if you want to focus on that particular quest, you just select it, hit your A button, and then you're good to go. It's already on your map, you know where to go, you know what to do. And it also updates after you do certain things, like the dialogue or the log, you will see that it changes to what you need to do, so it's a lot more easy to navigate 100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't mind that, but I just think it's an interesting change that like the series I think used to really like I guess I don't know if it's a trust issue with the player or it just it just trusted that you would pay attention to the dialogue and it rewarded you for paying attention to it. And I think that's part of what
Yeah,
engaged players with the story as well. Is like they have to pay attention or else they'll miss something important for gameplay as well.
that's yes, that's correct. I totally agree with you. And that's why newer players, they kind of struggle with the older games, because when I tell them listen to what they have to tell you, it's because it's important. Like, you kind of, it makes sense as to why you're doing certain things or what you need to do, versus just having a character or an npc telling you exactly what to do. They will always give you hints but not really tell you specifically the steps that you need to follow, which was kind of amazing. And one of the things is like discoverability, like that feeling of me being able to figure something out by connecting the dots. That was very exciting for me. So that's kind of the things that really drive me in terms of when I was playing certain games, especially when I was talking about the dungeon layouts or the temples, the items. Like, it really gives you that kind of excitement about, hey, I managed to figure this out. Like, it's not that you're the smartest people in the world, because a lot of the puzzles are super easy and simple, but it gives you that kind of satisfaction and a feeling that you accomplished something by talking to npcs or reading certain journals, or yeah, just getting putting things together. It gives you that feeling that will always have me come back to all of the games. Like, I've discovered something new, or there's like a little door there. I know I can set up a bomb there, and that's gonna take me somewhere. So I'm gonna get back. I'm gonna backtrack eventually. I'm gonna do it, and you have that kind of drive to keep on going and keep exploring pretty much. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I love that the games just they reward you for paying attention. They reward you for engaging with their mechanics. I guess I do want to ask. I want to change the question a little bit because I do think the history of the Zelda series shows that Nintendo, I think, listens to fan feedback. Whenever they go forward, it's usually taking notes that people give. And so, just on the off chance that someone's
Hmm.
watching this video, what is your feedback for the next entry? What do you want out of the next mainline 3D Zelda entry?
um I never thought I was going to say this, because I have to say that it wasn't really an issue for me in Breath of the Wild, but I feel that instead of fixing it, they kind of broke it. And I'm talking about weapon durability. It's so annoying that you can't really use a weapon that long, even though you're using fuse. And even though you're kind of paying attention to, well, I can probably diffuse this and I can probably try something out, it doesn't work. For some reason, like the lifespan that you had on a regular weapon, it's because they're rusty, right? They're kind of decayed. I understand why, but it's more like, why do you even have to do that? Like, I don't really understand, because one of the things that they were discussing on one of the forums is like, they had this kind of feeling. Let's put an example: the fierce deity mask. As soon as you get it, that's a reward, right, for getting all the masks, and you are overpowered against Majora's mask. That gives you excitement. Like, it really drives you to try to complete the game, complete get like 100% of the game or whatever. But now it's more like, why do I even bother to get a weapon that I know it's not going to last? Yeah, I might respawn. I might be able to get it again, whichever is the case, but it's still the same. So I mean, I don't really understand why they turned the life of the weapons. Like, it doesn't really, I don't really understand. I feel like when players are have a very good weapon or a very great armor, it's satisfying for you to defeat your foes using that armor, because it took you a while to collect it. It took you a while to upgrade it, or whatever's the case, just so it breaks on you as soon as you're fighting with the enemy. It doesn't make sense to me. So it wasn't really a problem for me before. Now it is. So I hope they just step away from it. Or I've heard a lot of, rumors as to if Nintendo could come up with a real repair system, that'll be amazing, right? But that's not a thing. Like, the Octorok was kind of a workaround, but it doesn't really work 100%. And the other thing will be, I guess, if we can set up something, like if we can just go back to having a companion. I think that is something that we're kind of missing, and it doesn't feel the same. Like, even if it's just another Navi, even if it's just another fairy, like, just a companion. Like, even Eslo was super nice to have as a companion, and he was literally a hat, right? So I feel like that should really come back. I don't really understand why it's no longer there. The linear, I I would say like 90%. Going back. It's not coming back. Um, the item system in terms of the dungeons and temples, we got the temples again, but the temples weren't as good as I was expecting. Probably it's my fault because I set the bar very, very high, or we set the bar very high, but they were good. It's just that it didn't click to me that much. But if we could just put it that, like, the weapon durability and the companion, that'd be great.
Both great notes. I totally agree with both of those. And I love the combat Tears of the Kingdom. There's things I think it fixes from Breath of the Wild with being able to use more materials to create, either stronger weapons or for arrows. I think that's huge. Like it finally makes a use of your materials. But I think durability, that's a
Yeah.
system that it doesn't completely address that. It does allow you to make more
Hmm.
weapons on the fly. So, but it doesn't address the fact of like, well, what do I do when I get a sword I like? I mean, it allows you to display swords in your house. And as soon as I got a really cool one, I was like, well, I just kind of want to display it at this point because I don't want to break it, which is not, the game is meant to be played. So if there's a system that doesn't incentivize playing the game, then it's not working perfectly. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. And it also has to do with um I feel it has a little bit more about thinking it through. Like, when I don't know, let's put an example of a Souls game. You're kind of thinking through how you're going to be approaching the enemy, how you're going to be attacking, what kind of weapon you're going to be using, what kind of armor you're going to be using. And I feel like in Tears of the Kingdom, or the new weapon system, is more like, okay, if you have the dust bow and it's a very accurate bow, you're not going to use it against the bokoblins right in front of you. Like it's just a waste. So instead, use it for something that you need accuracy. So it kind of pushes a little bit more to kind of think outside the box a little bit. But still, I feel like it's ridiculous that you're only able to use them for a few shots and then it just breaks. Like and again, it wasn't an issue for me, but after playing it for a while, I'm like, I'm exploring the depths right now in Tears of the Kingdom, and seriously, I don't engage, I don't really fight any of the enemies or the camps. Like I just avoid them completely because I don't want to waste my weapons. Like I really want to keep my weapons. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not gonna go against them. It's just that my main objective is for me to get the light root or whatever. So I'm not gonna be wasting all of my weapons there, because first I have to get more weapons. I have to get them enhanced. I probably need to prepare. So my strategy is to simply avoid them completely. And once I'm well equipped, then I'll probably head back and do whatever I have to do to get rid of that camp. But then the Blood Moon, of course, and yeah, everybody's gonna be there and more powerful. So yeah.
A great answer. I think we're wrapping up the podcast episode now. So first of all, thank you so much for being on. But second of all, do you have any upcoming videos that you want to plug? Get my audience excited about. This is also a reminder to. I'll put a link to your channel in the description. Excuse me. So everyone, go ahead and subscribe. But yeah, do you have any upcoming projects?
Oh, no, thank you very much for having me. I mean, it has been a pleasure. I know that I really get excited about when we were talking about Zelda, and you don't really pay attention to time, but you can literally be talking by like for hours without even realizing that. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that you gave me the time to be here with you. And about upcoming videos, so I'm currently going through a Zelda marathon when I'm trying to beat every single mainline game. So I'm not really focusing on spin-offs or anything like that, just mainline games. And I'm currently uploading those on my channel. So I'm slowly going through them because they were live streams. So we're kind of currently editing like the entire playthrough, so I have like a summary, and I wouldn't say highlights because I do focus on the actual playthrough, but it has very funny moments where I kind of goof around, and honestly, they're hilarious most of the time. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I'm slowly working my way into creating a weekly video that I'm probably going to be naming Nintendo Weekly, where it's just going to be me sharing stories, mostly Zelda, but of course, it's going to be focused a little bit more on Nintendo overall. But Nintendo Zelda has been like a topic for quite a while already. So I'll be doing that. And the last thing is that I'll be uploading very small videos. And I say small videos because I do want to get into the analysis of some of the games or dungeons or tops that I believe it will be nice for me to share. But I'm slowly going through that because I want to really script them out and have a good video. But I'm just starting and learning. So forgive me if I mess up. It's going to be either a very small video that might not make a lot of sense, but my goal is to get better at it. And the only way that I'm going to get better at it is for me to be uploading more videos. So yeah, gameplays, analysis, and weekly news or Nintendo Weekly that I'll be uploading on my channel.
Nice. Well, that's super exciting. Everyone watching, go feel free to see what's already out. Give her channel some likes,
Thank you.
subscribe. Y'all know the drill. Once again, thank you so much for being on the show. But without further ado,
Thank you.
I'll let y'all go. Cut to black.